Sounds good. This is actually really helpful.
You want me to set it up?
Yeah, good job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just let her know that I forwarded it to you.
Okay, that's good.
From what I recollected, it was actually really good.
Yeah.
All right, welcome everybody. We're having a technical conference on the grid modernization phase 2, docket number 20190327. I'm going to introduce everybody from the commission, and then I'll ask Hawaiian Electric, their one representative, to introduce everyone else, and then the consumer advocate, the same thing. So my name is Mike Wallerstein. I'm the docket attorney for this docket. To my left at the end of the table is Randy Baltimore, our chief of the Office of Policy and Research, then Commissioner Naomi Kawai, and to my right, Commissioner Colin Yost. Further to my right, Andrew Okabe, and then way in the back behind the pillars, we have engineers Alan Hirayama, Tae-san Kim, and then Clarice Schaefer, who's in OPR as well. And then I'll turn it to you. Please introduce everyone from Hawaiian Electric.
All right, thank you. So my name is Nathan Tadaro. I lead the grid modernization program for Hawaiian Electric. To my right, we have Rich Van Drennen from our regulatory team. Across from me, we have Sherry Ishikawa, who's the Director of Operational Technology. To her left is Ryan Little, the Director of Telecom. I look here on the teams. I see we have Ken Aramaki. He's the Director of T&D Planning and Interconnection Planning. And then we also have Tracy Black, one of our attorneys, and then Riley Syria, the Manager of Reliability and Resiliency.
Thank you. And then to the consumer advocate, please.
Good afternoon, Marcy Chang with the Division of Consumer Advocacy, Chief Engineer. Thank you.
Thank you. So today we're going to get, I believe, 2 presentations from Hawaiian Electric, and then there should be ample time for questions from the commission staff, and the consumer advocate. So with that, maybe we can get the slides up on the screen, and I'll turn it over to you, Nathan.
Sounds good. Maybe if we can move on to slide 5, Andrew. While you're doing that, on behalf of Hawaiian Electric, we just want to say thank you to the commissioners, commission staff, and the consumer advocate for the opportunity to have a technical conference on Grid Mod Phase 2. This docket is something that really started back in 2019. You could almost trace it back to the approval of the grid modernization strategy by the commission back in 2018. Which really approved a multi-phase approach to grid modernization for Hawaiian Electric. And so phase 1 was really what I would call kind of our customer-facing technologies, right? So the company requested and was approved and ultimately completed a project to bring a new digital modernized technology to our customers in the form of smart meters. And so we recently completed that project at the end of September. We deployed about 95% of all customer accounts now have AMI. There's about 3.5% of customers who formally opted out, and we have another 1.5% of customers who neither opted out nor actually ever gave us access to their meters. So they had things that were blocking access. So whether that was a lock fence, gate, a vehicle, obstruction, things like that, right? And so, we've got that kind of like delta there, but, by and large, I think that was a really successful project for the company. As we stated in the semi-annual status report that we filed at the end of December, I think the collaboration between Hawaiian Electric and the commission, evolving the smart meter program from a opt-in to a proportional opt-out, we kind of demonstrated our ability to execute on the proportional opt-out. Commission asked about our interest in doing full deployment of AMI, and that was successful. And so we really have some tailwinds there. and we were able to execute that project in time and within the cost cap. So, that project though is it was the first step in a multi-pronged grid modernization approach. So grid mod phase 2, which is why we're here today, is around, okay, so our customers have smart meters that are enabling them to see their load in a disaggregated manner. They're able to see that through their energy portal. They're able to participate in new customer programs, like the Shift and Save, pilot, things like that. Now it's about making investments more in the grid infrastructure side around like the devices that we have on our distribution lines and subtransmission. It's about substation automation. It's about upgrading our control systems and securing all of those distribution field devices and making sure that we've got reliable and resilient telecommunications to support, these field devices and the substation automation, et cetera, right? And so that's really what we want to speak with you today about. If you go to the next slide. Last year, and I know there have been multiple iterations of applications in this docket, right? So in 2019, we had the first application. It was just focusing on an ADMS. And the commission requested that we come back and file an updated application that included field devices. And so the company did that. And then after that, there was an opportunity to go after grant funding. And then also, the commission desired that we focus on executing grid mod phase 1 before we move our attention towards grid mod phase 2. And so we did that. I know we've had 2 applications to the Department of Energy for grid mod phase 2 funding, and unfortunately we have been unsuccessful in both of those. Every time we've done a supplemented and updated application, the company has truly taken to heart feedback from the commission and the consumer advocate to kind of modify the applications. And hopefully you've seen that, whether it was adding field devices to the overall application, whether it was, I know that the consumer advocate had a lot of concerns around line sensors and the inclusion of that, and so we kind of went back and sharpened our pencils and ultimately determined, there's an opportunity to remove that from the scope. Things like that, to the one last year where we really started focusing the application around how can it be used for wildfire mitigation purposes and grid resiliency, right? And so, ultimately, because last year's application with the DOE wasn't successful, and this slide here is really just providing a summary of like what was it that we were trying to accomplish under the DOE application last year. And I do have some slides later on that are going to do a comparison of what we filed last year versus what we're currently thinking of for an updated application, because that's really, I would say, our intent and objective here is, the company's desire to file a supplemental application to grid mod phase 2 once again, with the recognition of, we didn't get the DOE grant funding, but we believe this work is very important. The drivers for why we need to make these grid modernization investments around reliability, wildfire mitigation, DER integration, those haven't disappeared. They haven't gone away. And so we do believe that there's a real need to move forward with this work. We would like to be able to do that, but we also recognize that a total project of $215 million, without grant funding, that, we need to revisit that and find a way to do a portion of what we were previously thinking of at a lower cost, right? And so that's really what this meeting is about. It's about trying to share with you kind of our plan on how to do that. So next slide, Andrew. All right. So you can see here, I kind of laid out the 5 components of the Grid Mod Phase 2 application. The middle column here shows the current scope for the Grid Mod Phase 2 app based on what we filed last May. And then the right column shows what the revised scope is. Okay. And so, the things that didn't change, I won't spend much time on that. And I am going to go into each of these components a little bit deeper on the subsequent slides. But, on the ADMS side, we still believe that all 3 phases of the ADMS are important and necessary and need to be rolled out for all 5 of our islands. On the field devices side, that's where we're making some changes or proposing some changes. So, for some background, last year when we filed the application, our wildfire risk areas were based on the DLNR's wildfire risk areas, right? Which I think in our wildfire working group meetings, we've talked about how that was kind of more communities based and less about where the wildfire risk is exactly in terms of like the infrastructure. And so the companies over the past year have spent a lot of time and effort to develop updated wildfire risk maps. And so with that, we have, I would say, greater confidence and precision in terms of what are the circuits that are truly in high and medium wildfire risk areas. And so because of that, we're able to reduce the total number of smart reclosers that we're thinking of to just address the wildfire risk area. So right now, you can see that the smart recloser count goes from 424 to now just from like a wildfire risk area driver, we're looking at about 176 to cover tier 3 and tier 2. And I'll go through the benefits later on what the smart reclosers are intended to do. And then on the reliability side, because, certainly wildfire is front and center, but we can't forget about reliability, right? And so we do believe that reliability should continue to be addressed in non-wildfire risk areas, right? And I say that, and I want to make that important distinction because the 176 smart reclosers in wildfire risk areas are going to they're going to help improve reliability in those areas by minimizing the consequences of some of our wildfire-related operational actions. The smart reclosers in the non-wildfire areas, so those are the ones that we're identifying because we've got worse performing circuits from a reliability standpoint that we want to address. And we believe that the smart reclosers, when you couple them with the ADMS, are going to provide reliability benefits there, right? The motor operated switches, that count does go up, but that's because we're looking at, okay, what are all the sub-transmission lines in these tier 3, tier 2 wildfire risk areas? Now that we have a better sense of what those areas are, and that ultimately produced an analysis that showed that we actually need to increase the motor operated switches to address tier 3 and tier 2 wildfire risk areas. And so this is some of the information that, I know the company tomorrow is filing its 2025 to 2027 wildfire safety strategy. And so you are going to find there's a section on grid modernization in there and talking about how these smart reclosers and motor operated switches are an important part of the wildfire safety strategy. Voltage line regulators, you can see those quantities go down. And that's because we have actually started a number of projects already under existing programs to address hosting capacity issues by deploying voltage line regulators. And so that's really the primary driver. But also, I would say that we've limited the voltage line regulators to only what are the circuits that we truly know have some hosting capacity issues that we haven't started projects already on to address. And so what is that delta? And so it's I would say much more specific and defined list of circuits. And so that's how we end up dropping the voltage line regulator count down. And then on the SCADA, again, this is related to the wildfire safety strategy. We want to get substation automation to some of these distribution substations in tier 3 and tier 2 fire risk areas. Now that we have a better handle on what the tier 3 and tier 2 fire risk areas are, it ultimately produce a recommendation of 18 legacy distribution substations to expand SCADA to. On the PLTE expansion and the OT cyber monitoring, we're thinking really no changes there. It's really about we want to continue getting PLT. We want to expand PLTE to support whatever field devices we're deploying. So that way we're not relying on public carrier, and I'll talk more about that and why that is later on. And on the OT cyber monitoring, as long as we are deploying field devices out there onto the network, we need to ensure that those are cyber secure. And so, we weren't planning to make any changes on that in terms of that scope. And so again, we are looking at, in the absence of DOE grant funding, how do we reduce costs, but present a scope that we really believe is truly necessary today, and something that we want to move forward with as soon as possible. And so we are planning to file a supplemental application, hopefully sometime in Q1 of this year. Andrew, next slide. Thank you. All right. So ADMS, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about this. You can see here kind of some of the capabilities and the benefits of the ADMS, but I really want to highlight just a few of them. So, one is around, we've got all this great AMI data, all of these like nodes and endpoints providing information to us. But a component of our grid mod strategy was taking the AMI data from phase 1 and then integrating it into our control systems in phase 2. And so we want to bring in that AMI data, integrate it along with field device data, and that's going to help us identify customer outage locations quicker, as well as abnormal voltages, right? So things like the fault location analysis, well, that's kind of a enabler into being able to transition into fault location isolation and service restoration, right? And that's where like the ADMS is providing recommendations to our system operators around, hey, we've been able to either utilize this field device or this AMI endpoint to get precise details on where the outages are happening, be able to send a troubleman out there and a crew quickly to go out and not only isolate the customers on that circuit to minimize the number of folks affected by the outage, but then also more quickly get service restored. We're also budgeting for data cleanup and integration of the ADMS with other systems, such as our GIS data from SCADA. It's going to help us better understand grid configuration. We have a lack of visibility around DERs right now. And so, the ADMS with these integrations, with all the data coming in for AMI, field devices, et cetera, is going to give us a better state estimation and be able to integrate our DER management system to be able to dispatch DER and enable grid services. And then there's a lot of wildfire-related benefits associated with the ADMS. So, we want to be able to overlay wildfire risk zones into the ADMS and be able to change those zones in a dynamic manner based on what we're getting from our weather stations, as well as meteorological forecasting services. We want to be able to overlay information such as like wildfire ignition points or hotspots or lightning strikes or information from our Alert West video cameras, right, into the ADMS. So our system operators know exactly what's happening and where on their system, so that way they can take the appropriate actions and steps. We want to be able to have our field devices associated with the zones that I previously mentioned, and be able to provide recommendations from the ADMS to system operators on operational actions that they should take based on the environmental conditions. So if the environmental conditions kind of trigger a need for blocking reclosing or enhanced fast trip, those are the types of things that having a smarter control system will enable the company to do. Right now, much of our wildfire safety strategy from an operational standpoint is, it is kind of, I would say, kind of like taking a hammer approach in the sense of like, we either have to have fast strip on or off, right? We either block auto reclosing or it's, or not. Being able to do that in a dynamic manner is going to have tremendous reliability benefits for customers, right? And these are things that utilities on the mainland have either enabled or they're working towards, right? These are, I would say, best practices that we're seeing in California in terms of being able to do things more surgically and dynamically. And then, yeah, I think that's kind of at a high level, the wildfire related benefits of the ADMS that we're seeing other utilities implement and something that we really desire to be able to do. I know around like PSPS, an ADMS with the field devices, we're going to be able to better isolate customers and more surgically implement PSPS, right? I mean, we want to eventually get weather stations on each side of the isolation switch. So that way we can make informed decisions on, okay, well, we don't need to PSPS an entire circuit. We can just PSPS a portion of the circuit, right? All right. Next slide. So field devices. So again, we've got three primary types of field devices that we are looking to deploy. The first is the smart recloser. And so this is really around being able to do automatic switching and being able to isolate customers to minimize those affected by an outage, whether it's something that from a fault happened or we preemptively create an outage because of a PSPS action, right? And so, the benefits here are really around like, how do we, like from a wildfire standpoint, again, how do we really minimize the reliability consequences of all these operational actions that we're taking to reduce wildfire risk, but also delicately balance that with the need to provide reliable service, right? And so it's really about how do we just minimize the number of customers who are going to experience a service outage. Motor operated switches, similar to the smart reclosers, except, smart reclosers we're putting on distribution circuits, motor operated switches we're putting at the subtrans level. And then the voltage regulators, these inject reactive power and they're helping us to address any voltage issues caused by DERs, and that ultimately enables us to improve DER hosting capacity. All right, thank you, Andrew. OT, so the first three components here on this list are around the OT cyber monitoring solution. And then the last two are SCADA and private LTE. And so on the OT side, we've got really three components: packet capture and storage, network segmentation, and threat detection. And so, packet capture and storage is really about collecting better data from the OT network and being able to better investigate any potential anomalies there. The network segmentation is around being able to have these unidirectional network communication devices that really allow only one-way transfer of data between segmented networks. And then the threat detection is around being able to identify vulnerabilities better and be able to take action without affecting reliability. the SCADA. So that is, we want to be able to remotely enhance fast trip settings in the future. If we want to be able to do that, we need to have SCADA to the substation. And so, again, this is really around these operational actions that we're taking for wildfire. How do we minimize the impact to customers from a reliability standpoint? And so we believe, the substation automation investment and being able to remotely turn on and turn off enhanced fast trip is important. And then the private LTE, certainly we've got a number of field devices right now out there that rely on things like public carrier, but as we saw in Lahaina and as many utilities have seen, when a natural disaster or emergency happens, you're kind of fighting for bandwidth and priority, right? And so being able to have a network that we are ultimately in control of and can prioritize Hawaiian Electric assets on during an emergency, during a natural disaster, that's something that we believe is really important. And that's why we still believe that PLT expansion is a necessary component. I know last time when we spoke, we talked about, hey, are these investments things that, are solely for setting aside the reliability and DER integration? Last time we spoke, there was a lot of focus on the wildfire, and we were asked, like, are these investments just intended to really address from a natural disaster standpoint wildfire? And our answer remains no. It's to help with all natural disasters, right? Being able to have visibility to everything that's happening, on our grid, being able to control devices and be able to take more semi-autonomous or autonomous actions, being able to bring in weather data, all that supports a multitude of natural disasters. The private LTE resilience, again, that's not just, if a wildfire happens, right? We've got secure communications, right? It could be a hurricane, it could be whatever natural disaster. These are all fundamental capabilities that we need to have to be able to really address any. So with that, that's kind of the slides that we've got prepared here. I'll pause and myself and the many other subject matter experts that we've got here, happy to take any questions on any of the materials.
Thank you. So I think we'd like to start with questions from the commission staff, and then we'll move on to the consumer advocate. So anyone from the commission, please.
Thank you. For the PLTE, is there any concern about that technology sunsetting in any way, or not, needing to be upgraded in the near future?
I'll start it. Ryan's our PLTE expert. I'll just say that PLTE is kind of the future of utility telecommunications. All the California IOUs, I believe, have made significant PLTE investments, as well as other utilities. But Ryan, do you want to expand on that?
Oh, sure. Testing. Yeah. So I mean, PLT, it's similar to any type of router or any other type of equipment. You will have life cycles along the way. We have been talking with several utilities across from California, like I said, at conferences and shows like that. And it is something that a lot of utilities are trying to figure out where the space lies within the utilities, but it's very much of an interest for a lot of utilities. It will probably need life cycles on a regular basis every 10 or so years, just as regular equipment does.
Okay, but because it's a kind of your own internal network, it's not something that you don't have concerns about some third party discontinuing the operability of it. It should work. I mean, and I'm saying this as an absolute novice in this technology, but is it more like a walkie-talkie or a shortwave radio in the sense that you could just use it indefinitely in theory, even if the technology is no longer supported by larger network actors?
Sure. I mean, there are several vendors in the space. There's there's Ericsson's, Nokia's, and I imagine that the technology will be changing or so, but when we're buying it, it's it's not like we have to keep working with them out. The equipment should work until failure. We have to get our normal subscriptions and everything from the vendors, but there are other choices to evolve around too, if one vendor doesn't want to proceed forward with that solution.
Okay. And then a question about the ADMS relating to DER asset management and dispatch capabilities. Can you get into a little more detail what you're thinking now in terms of how this technology would allow you to dispatch grid services from DERs and what that means at this point? It's an ever-changing thing, but I just wonder if you can give an update on that.
We envision that the larger DER units would be that have communication with them, that we would be able to dispatch them using this ADMS. On the neighbor islands, it might even be that we connect those largers to the EMS actually. So we're still trying to weigh that out just because of the way the islands are operated. Maui and Hawaii have very little spinning reserve, and so they might need a little bit more direct connection to that. But then the rooftop PVs and things like that would still rely on maybe third-party aggregators. Other items that we already have in place would rely on integrating with those aggregators to invoke any type of signals. The vision is we think like a DRMS or a DERMS type of thing. There's the controllability, but then there's the back office billing type of things and the rules that the billing type of rules reside not in operations, but that information comes to the ADMS so that when we press a button, it sends the signals, and then that back office knows like, I can only run this 6 hours. I can only run that 4 hours. And it optimizes based on what operations is giving them that we're going to need at 6 p.m. We're going to need, 4 megawatts for 4 hours. And then you send that signal, and then that other machine is the one that, okay, we'll grab this, we'll grab that, we'll grab that. So that's the vision that we see. We probably need to work with our ADMS vendor and the other DRMS vendor to make that happen still.
Okay. Do you have a target minimum size then for the DERs that could participate in the ADMS? Would it be like a megawatt or something, or?
Something like a megawatt, maybe going to the EMS for the Hawaii Island and Maui, and then like 500 kW maybe on the ADMS for Oahu. That's what we're just thinking initially, but I think we're still looking at our architecture and those types of things.
So in theory, it's something that might become a facet of future community solar projects and other, not necessarily just the utility scale,
Right.
but other programs that have smaller,
Yes,
but still reasonably large
yes.
DR facilities. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm focusing on, I think it's page 7 of your slideshow under the revised scope. Can you give me an idea of where, given the fact that you revised the scope in the absence of DOE funding, where you folks are targeting these different improvements? So for example, in field devices, you've identified you're prioritizing WSS circuits, worst performing reliability circuits. What islands are those located in so that we can get an idea of the impact to the customer?
Riley, are you able to kind of speak towards the worst performing circuits? And do you have the information in front of you on kind of where they're generally located?
Sure. So the worst performing circuits are located spread out, right? There are different factors that can cause worst performing circuits, right? It could be the layout of the how the circuits are versus underground versus overhead, vegetation, things like that. So it's not like you'll see it like concentrated in just one area. So we do see some of the worst performing circuits are now inside of the wildfire areas because of the enhanced fast trip settings and reclosed blocking. So that has made reliability worse in those circuits. And yet we do see some of our other worst performing circuits inside heavily vegetated areas still, where we've always had some worse reliability due to the tall trees that are that we just can't get to a lot of times, right? So it's spread out in multiple
So have you
areas.
done that? Have you pinpointed your analysis exactly those locations by company? Is essentially what I'm asking.
I think Riley, we know which specific circuits by company, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so, yeah, we don't know like what poll we would.
Yeah, I'm not asking for that
Yeah.
granular type of.
Certainly in the application, we can break out, these are the circuits that we would be targeting for every island. We could provide the circuit information and certainly the counts.
Similarly, you've identified that you're expanding SCADA to the 18 legacy distribution substations.
Yeah.
You have have you identified those 18 legacy distribution substations?
Yeah, Ken, we've got the list of the 18 substations identified, correct? So, my understanding is we do, Commissioner, and certainly in the application, we would follow that detail.
So some of the things that I'm going to be looking for in the application is basically the breakout by company, because we want to know what the impact to the ratepayers are.
Yep.
So thank you.
On a similar issue I'm looking at slide 7, there's this 45 to up to 150 smart reclosers. I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, but what's the variability there and when do you think you'll know the number that you actually want?
Yeah, so that is, that's really depending on the severity of kind of the reliability performance. And so what it is around, we did an analysis around standard deviations of reliability performance. And so if we were to address all circuits that had greater than one standard deviation of reliability degradation, then that would be the 150 smart reclosers. If we did it based on 2 standard deviations, that would be 45. And so what we're doing right now is we're trying to, we didn't have a dollar amount specified yet because we are still kind of calculating what the updated cost would be of the overall Grid Mod Phase 2 app. And so that's where we're still kind of trying to figure out what do we think is reasonable and gets us closer to, I'll say we are trying to get, like the current app is 215 million, right? And so we're trying to see, can we get closer to, let's say 150, right? What would that be? Right. And so we're doing that analysis to try and figure out what those costs would be.
Following up on that question though, I understand you folks are prioritizing and trying to get to as many of the top, I guess your top number, 150 smart reclosers. Are you trying to accomplish a greatest amount of reclosers being addressed or critical needs?
Yeah, I would say it's probably more the latter. Like what are the critical needs? And that's the analysis that we're continuing to do.
So another thing that I guess I'm going to be looking for in your application is the timing and why, if this is critical, what is the time frame for implementation and why it's critical? In other words, how does it affect overall system reliability?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I will just say one thing I know in our last application, we had kind of a 7-year timeframe. And that was partially because of the DOE grant and the way that some of the funding was happening over the life cycle of the project. In this application, we're going to be trying to do grid mod more in like a 5-year timeframe, but certainly we'll break out for you, you know, by year, what are the number of devices, by island, et cetera, and why we think that timing makes sense.
Okay, yeah, because I guess for us, we're going to start looking at it from a measuring standpoint.
Yeah.
How far along have you accomplished everything? Thanks.
Sorry, you had a question?
Can you hear me? Online. Okay, yeah, so regarding the revised scopes, in addition to the list of circuit names that you folks are going to be providing, can you also include like which of those circuits are the wildfire risk circuits?
Yes.
Yeah, we are really concerned about the reliability impact of the protective measures. And in addition, like in response to an IR for the I guess the request to suspend the T&D safety and safety metrics, mentioned that the ADMS is needed to turn on and off the protective measures. Yeah. So I was kind of curious, like, to what extent can some of the circuits at least be turned on and off with the current EMS? Because the ADMS is not going to be implemented for a while, yeah. And to the extent that you can turn off the protective measures when it's not a red flag warning period, that can have a really substantial, I think, improvement to the reliability of the circuits. Yeah, if you can do that more.
I'm going to answer the first part of your question. I'm going to share to answer the second part. So the first part, we know already which circuits for the smart reclosers and motor operated switches are wildfire tier 3, tier 2, or non-wildfire circuits, and we'll certainly identify that in the application. And then around the capabilities of the EMS right now to remotely and kind of dynamically enable or disable our wildfire operational practices, I'll turn it over to Sherry.
Yeah, but using the EMS now, we have to go one by one to unblock and block, as well as Maui and Hawaii, we can enable and disable fast trip. On Oahu, we can block and unblock, but we actually cannot remotely enable and disable fast trip. We have to go to the physical substations to toggle. We are trying to implement a project to change those toggle switches to enable remote fast trip for Oahu. So, but with the EMS, it would be one at a time. With the advantage of the ADMS, which we had a demo by OSI, is you can group all of those signals together, press one button, and it can send the signals for the enablement in a block format type of thing. So I'm sure in the EMS, we could try to do that with a script or something, but it's inherently built in the ADMS. So that's part of the advantage.
Is that, I mean, I was planning to look at doing some of that script work or whatever for the EMS.
Right now, we are not, because we don't have that wildfire risk analysis piece in place that allows us to determine when it's like low risk of wildfire. So we kind of turned on the fast trip and we kept it on because there hasn't been a basis for us that we could solidly stand on to turn it off. I know we're in the middle of winter, but this winter has been kind of dry. And so the grasses are still dry. So we've kept it on. So that's part of that other piece on that wildfire analysis that maybe Nathan can touch on. But without that, we don't have any basis to turn off the fast trip at this time.
So I just want to, add some color. So we've got a wildfire risk planning tool in place right now, and you're going to learn a lot about that in the 2025 to 2027 WSS that's filed tomorrow. What Sherry's really talking about is around a operational wildfire risk model. And what that means is, a planning tools saying, okay, these are your probability of, having a wildfire here and what the consequence would be and what would be the financial impact and, what types of system hardening investments or other wildfire mitigations do you put in place in order to address it out, right? And what's the priority and things like that. The operational tool is real time. So taking into account real-time weather data, real-time fuels data in drought indices and things like that. Being able to say, okay, like at this time tomorrow between these hours, this is your fire potential index score, right? And then outside of those hours, here's kind of like a real-time forecasting model, and that's the component that the company needs and we'll talk about in the WSS filing tomorrow. But that's also a component that we want to be able to then feed that into the ADMS and integrate that. So that way the ADMS and the system operators are able to ingest that information from a real-time operational risk model to then inform, okay, how do we more dynamically turn on and off, these enhanced fast trip settings and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. It's really helpful to get these in advance of the applications. I have a question about a point that you made about the that the voltage line regulator quantity may go down because the projects have already been addressing or have already been started under other programs to address hosting capacity issues. I was just wondering if you guys plan on also identifying in the application a list of circuits that I guess will benefit, well, I guess see hosting capacity upgrades due to these installations.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah, we plan in the application identifying the circuits that we would be deploying the voltage line regulators on, and then also quantifying what we believe the hosting capacity benefits would be for each of those individual circuits.
And then in terms of the projects that have already been started, I guess, will those be identified somewhere? I guess that wouldn't be part of the application,
Yeah,
but I'm
it's
just curious, like, there is a decrease in the amount of voltage line regulators. Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, how much of that decrease is due to projects that have already been started?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, Ken, are you able to, it looks like you got.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
as part
you
of the
wanna-
application, we can probably identify which circuits we originally had in the original grid mod application for voltage regulators. And basically this is what's going in this one is a subset of that, and whatever big volts we can identify those as these scoped ones. And then the corresponding, I think in a previous IR we provided like high level hosting capacity increase due to these voltage line regulators, and we can provide that as well.
Awesome, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, this is a little bit off topic, but I wanted to go back to grid mod phase 1.
Yeah.
For the 95% of AMI meters that are rolled out, do you have any rough feel, like if some of those are actually currently cellular and will be switched to kind of the fan or nested?
Okay, that's a good question. The cellular figures that we have are pretty low. Is definitely under 1%. And I'd have to go back and double check like what the specific count was, but it was pretty minimal. I would say that if a customer is on cellular right now, it's it's less likely because, oh, the RF mesh network isn't working in that area. It's more likely because to actually go put out RF mesh in, let's say, a customer's area where they're really kind of out there, we have to put gateways, we have to put routers. That starts really adding up in terms of the network costs. And so sometimes cellular actually makes more sense. Now, one of the things around private LTE is that because of interest on the mainland, utilities and AMI providers are talking about getting private LTE either under the glass in meters. So utilities can utilize private LTE AMI meters in the future, or at least having their gateways and router or their gateways backhauling off of private LTE, right? And so that's where we might, in the future, if we're able to expand our private LTE network, be able to get more customers on our mesh by actually being able to get a private LTE gateway closer to that customer, and where we don't have to add a bunch of routers then between the gateway and the customer endpoint. Or instead of being on a public carrier meter, maybe that customer in the future could be on a private LTE AMI meter. So those are that's another set of use cases for private LTE that, we know the utilities in California right now, they're all coming up on their AMI refreshes to 2.0 because they also kind of finished their AMI deployments around early 2010, 2012 time periods, right? And so they're now kind of doing their refresh, and we're monitoring what they're doing, right, to see. So that would be great.
Sorry, clarification. question.
Sure.
Are the cellular ones considered out of network?
They are considered out of the RF mesh network,
Okay,
but they are considered AMI because all the functionalities are the same. The
okay,
data still goes to the meter data management system. We still control the device through our AMI head-end system. They're fully capable of all the programs.
okay, so they can do like TOU.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
How
So functionality wise, it's all the same. It's just how do we get the data back from the customer? Most cost effective is the RF mesh, but in these cases where customers kind of in really rural areas and RF mesh just doesn't make sense from a cost standpoint, then we did proceed with cellular.
do you folks still have AMI meters that are out of network?
We do have AMI meters that are out of network in the sense of they were installed, they're technically in network, but then we weren't getting the performance that we wanted to. And so we are adding more network equipment, or we're like doing firmware upgrades and stuff like that. That's in our semi-annual status report, we talk about that. We're undergoing a network optimization effort, which is something that all utilities do at the end of their AMI deployments. And so that's something that we're not doing under the project. We're handling the network optimization under existing ARA funding. And so that's where, hey, you know what, like this area, we're getting intervals, but not as high as we would like to. So we're going to add a gateway, and we're working, with our telecom team to figure out where would we add that additional gateway to improve the performance. Or sometimes it's something where we're working with our AMI provider and we're just doing firmware upgrades to address something, right? And so, yeah, the like out of network, it's something where if the AMI meter, after we kind of monitor on a 7-day performance, if it doesn't seem like it's performing at the levels that we want it to, and over that 7-day period, we'll put it out of network. But then we're behind the scenes troubleshooting it. And then once it is performing well, we give it 30 days to make sure that it's truly meeting everything for 30 days. Then we'll put it back into network. So it's kind of a dynamic, like it's if there's an issue, we're focused on troubleshooting.
Like about how prevalent is the out of network issue?
It's under 1%
Okay,
of the overall. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I want to make sure the consumer advocate gets some time to ask questions. So Marcy, if you have any, please go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I just had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Let's see. Are you folks, and you guys are, I know you guys are still working on the application, but are you gonna, ask for a requested commission decision in order to in the application?
I'm sorry, Marcy, I didn't catch the second half.
Oh,
When I
sorry.
request,
Are you guys gonna ask for a, requested commission and order date by? I mean,
oh,
the
like,
application?
we need it by
Yeah.
the summer or,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think it's a good question. You know, I don't think we have like a date in mind. Certainly we believe these investments are necessary and things that we should start on right away, you know, especially since much of this is tied to wildfire safety strategy, right? And I know it's a docket that we've certainly spent a lot of time on, right? And, you know, we appreciated the CA's statement of position and support. I know certainly that was contingent upon the grant funding, right? But I think, you know, the drivers for these investments and what we're proposing are, you know, I think they are very much aligned though in the spirit of what what was previously proposed. But, you know, I think there's also this potential opportunity for GRIP 3 funding. And I think, you know, what we have heard and have continued here is that being able to have like go into those applications with, hey, the commission's already approved like the matching funding, like that certainly helps, right? Your application stream. So I think having that and being able to go into an application or in having approval while the application is being considered by the DOE, like that is a positive if we are able to submit a GRIP 3 application.
Okay, no, that's helpful to know. I guess, do you know the timing of that funding or?
Yeah, so we only know that a funding opportunity announcement will be released sometime in the spring of this year. What we don't know is when would concept papers need to be submitted, when would applications need to be submitted. I think if I were to go back and look at past history, we generally had a few months, right, Sherry, to get the concept papers in. And then after that, it was kind of a quick turnaround to go to the application. So I think it was like 3 to 4 months to get the application in. So ideally, you know, I think getting a decision this year and maybe late summer I would think would help us with our GRIP 3 application if we ended up, if that timing worked out.
No, that's helpful to understand the timing, I guess, you know, with the benefits associated with this application,
Yeah.
it's good to understand that part. I guess in looking at that, you know, part of the amended application did have a lot of tables that had the scope from the previous application to the revised application. That would be helpful to have too, yeah. How the scope change, what, and building upon what you already answered, you know, why those changes were made, some of the priority, you know, how you guys figured out the priority
Yeah.
of some of those things. That was really helpful. And I think the bill impact by island would address
Yeah.
some of the questions that were raised earlier by the commissioners. And then also, I guess, I know for PLT expansion and OT cyber monitoring, you guys have the same scope. I guess for PLT expansion, will that change a little depending on the number of field device? I guess the field devices number
Yeah.
change, so that scope will change too.
Yeah, so we are on the PLT, like this, the scope, the objective of it remains the same around providing communications to the number of field devices, right? And certainly the number of field devices has changed. The analysis that we're working on right now is around well, where those field devices are. If they're spread out more, how does that impact the cost versus if they were more saturated in similar areas, right? Because that impacts the number of RAN sites that
Oh,
we
no,
can
that's
deploy,
okay,
right?
yeah.
So that's some of the like cost analysis work that we're still undergoing to try and figure out like what would it take, right? To be able to balance the PLT expansion with the cost.
Okay, no, that's helpful. And I guess just one last question on the SCADA expansion.
Yeah.
Your office has always been interested in trying to get as much, vision into even the substation areas and control into the substations. So I guess if you folks can put like how you're prioritizing those
Okay.
distribution substations. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions from the commission? All right, well, next on our agenda is a short break, so I think we should take that. So maybe 5 minutes. We come back at 3:05. Bathroom codes are on the door, and help yourself to snacks if you'd like some snacks. And we'll see you in about 5 minutes.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, welcome back. Next on our agenda is the second presentation from Hawaiian Electric. And I'll turn it back over to you, Nathan.
All right, thank you. We kind of started briefly touching upon some of the things I wanted to discuss, but for background, so, the company was successful in its GRIP 1 topic area 1 application, which was around grid resilience, and, the commission approved our T&D grid resilience project, and so the company's been actively focusing on execution of that. November 2023, the Biden administration announced a second round of funding of $3.9 billion. And so the company was involved in 3 separate applications. The first was another grid resilience grant application. Now, the DOE made available $918 million as part of the grid resilience grant topic area. And the company submitted a $200 million application with $100 million federal requests and $100 million that Hawaiian Electric would seek to provide cost share via ARA. And the company, the investments were really around system hardening. So a lot of conductor, pole replacement, field devices being replaced that met fire safety kind of compliance, field device requirements, things like that. Like expulsion fuses being replaced with sparkless fuses. The company ultimately was not selected by the DOE for the topic area. Topic area 3, which is around the grid innovation program, the DOE set aside $1.82 billion for that. The Hawaii State Energy Office submitted a $500 million application seeking $250 million in federal grant funding. And then Hawaiian Electric was going to contribute $242 million in cost share. And Hawaiian Electric's piece of that topic area 3 project was really around broken and down conductor technology that we wanted to deploy. Unfortunately, the company or the Hawaii State Energy Office was not selected for funding by the DOE. GRIP topic 2, the Smart Grid Grant, which is where this Grid Mod Phase 2 project falls under. The company wasn't selected for funding. The DOE set aside $1.08 billion. We submitted a $200 million grant application with, $205 million grant application with $100 million federal and then $105 million from potentially the EPRM application that we've been talking about during this meeting. Unfortunately, we were 0 for 3 on the grant applications in GRIP round 2. We did receive some feedback from the DOE. And so you can see on here kind of the 4 criteria and the strengths and the weaknesses. Candidly, there's not a lot of feedback provided getting into like specifics from the DOE on why you were not selected. And so it is, certainly there's some good strong points that the DOE shared, but, on some of the weaknesses around like responsiveness to the topic area priorities not clearly demonstrated. I think we were same level of detail as last time when GRIP 1 and we didn't get that feedback right, but this time we did get that feedback. So not entirely sure what's changed there, but, certainly it's something that we would be really spending a lot of extra time to make sure we hammer, our responsiveness to the topic area priorities in a GRIP 3 application really well, be extremely detailed. A strong point on the application was the team that we were proposing would be executing. We've got a lot of folks who have a lot of experience executing and delivering on smart grid projects. But some of the weakness that was described by the DOE was around like no specific roles, I guess, for partner organizations and the project management team. While we've got folks identified that would be leading the overall project, maybe individual like personnel that would be on the project management team weren't identified, and so the DOE, provided that as a weakness to us. No, certainly alignment with state and local resilience plans, right? So the DOE saw that, but one of the things that they look for is how will your project influence other utilities in other states, right? And so I think that's a lesson learned around, I think the ADMS component around really utilizing the ADMS to kind of semi-autonomously and more dynamically do all those operational settings changes we talked about on the wildfire front. Like that is, the future. And while some utilities in California have started doing that, they're still in the middle of that. And so I think that's an opportunity that going into it the next time around, we would definitely be like, okay, we're really going to hone in on that and really kind of talk about how this could be leveraged by other utilities around the nation, lessons learned. And then, on the community benefits plan, we got recognized for our relationships and demonstrating benefits to disadvantaged communities. But I guess the DOE felt like we didn't provide enough detail on some of the engagement that we would do specifically with some of the community groups. So yeah, I mean, these are all things that, we'll certainly take to heart. I know, our grant management office at Hawaiian Electric is eagerly anticipating when a funding opportunity announcement comes, and we're going to do everything that we can to certainly make sure that if there is another shot at funding, that we're going to go for it and definitely put our best foot forward again. No entity from the state of Hawaii, from my understanding, was awarded funding under GRIP 2, under the second round application. So I know the DOE, in a conference call we had with them the first time around, they certainly made a point to say, well, Hawaii was one of the top 5 states in awards for GRIP round 1. And so they were talking about how they really wanted to make sure that like all the states kind of got funding. And so certainly I think that probably played a role in no entity from the state of Hawaii getting funding in the second round of GRIP. Would that play a role in GRIP round 3? I don't know. Also, we need to see what's going to happen with GRIP round 3. Certainly there's a new administration going to be in Washington soon. And so, how could that potentially impact a third round of GRIP funding? That's still to be determined and something that we're very curious and eager to find out. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we are in terms of not only, the feedback we got from GRIP 2, but also kind of the information and insights that we have on a potential GRIP round 3. I don't know, share if there's anything that you've heard.
All right, questions from the commission?
Can you address the comment from DOE regarding a lack of baselines? That was in the third column.
Yeah, I mean, that was like almost verbatim. That's all they really said. And so I think maybe it's hard to exactly know exactly what they're talking about there. I think maybe it's around, maybe I would say like measurement and verification or like benefits quantification. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to do a better job of identifying like what would be some of the baseline safety performance or something like that that we would try and measure project progress against.
I mean, this strays into the wildfire safety strategy that is about to be filed, but I know that HECO's been doing some modeling of the overall risk mitigation effectiveness of your measures, and perhaps that might be a way to think about it. I mean, especially given what's going on in California now, being able to measure, present reasonable metrics and methodologies that to have some sort of respect nationally or at least in other jurisdictions as well, and be able to show how we're going to be doing things that's clearly and verifiably reduce our risk.
Yeah, I'll speak to in the 2025 to 2027 WSS that will be filed tomorrow. You will see the expected or estimated risk reduction, and it is broken down by the mitigation levels. So that is something that you'll see tomorrow. But that's good feedback, Commissioner, to try and include details like that in our next GRIP application, if there's an opportunity.
Hi, just contextually, in the grant application of the DOE, how are you applying systemically, and consistent with the grid planning, or are you emphasizing, the Maui wildfire and sort of the precedent setting impact? It's tied to what the commissioner just said, but I'm trying to understand like how you're coming at your application.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's both, certainly we emphasize the wildfire mitigation aspects of our GRIP 2 application. It was definitely a transition from our first GRIP round 1 application, which was just purely focused on reliability and DER integration and what this holistic distribution management solution could enable for the utility. Round 2, we did emphasize, Lahaina would happen, how we want to be able to enable new wildfire mitigation capabilities and the importance of that. But also, we didn't want to also shy away from the fact that it's going to have reliability benefits, it's going to have DER integration benefits, and how based on our planning, we've got recommendations on circuits and what needs to be done there as well.
And then going forward, one of the areas of weakness was about collaboration opportunities, partnerships, and things like that.
Yeah.
Certainly there's in this next application, the opportunity to identify the community interest in this from a lot of different perspectives. Is it Hawaiian Electric's, whether maybe you've done it already, but is that part of your plan in this next application to kind of make that more robust?
Yeah, we do a lot of community engagement. We had to develop community benefits plans. We got a lot of letters of support from the communities that we included in our application. I think what I gathered from the comment is while we have community benefits plans and those really speak to what would be the benefits for these community-based organizations, I think they're asking for a little bit more detail. What's the actual role, participating role that those community organizations would have in the actual project itself. And so I think that's something that we'll certainly make sure that we do a better job of really kind of fleshing that out and making it clear and explicit for the reviewers of the application. This is exactly what this organization is going to be doing as part of the project.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that the phase two applications, you were concerned that in phase one, so much of the money went to Hawaii that they might have wanted to direct it to other places. Do you have a sense of how much the phase two applications have the winning applications have achieved that goal of spreading the money around, so that does the third round look like potentially a more even playing field, or are there still large swaths of the country that haven't gotten anything?
Yeah, I personally don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. I think our grants management office, who, those are the folks dedicated to the grant effort, they might have some insight and I think, Rich, there's probably avenues for us to be able to share that intelligence with the commission, right? So we'll take that. We can get back to you on that.
And then relatedly, you had mentioned earlier that some of the applications that already came in with commission approval seem to have fared better. Do you know what that commission approval looked like? And specifically, was it contingent upon the money? Was it not contingent upon the money?
I don't, yeah, I mean, it's really based on conversations and feedback from the DOE, just that, your application is stronger when they know, like, they want to be able to award grant funding and have high confidence that they're going to be able to go through all the negotiations and actually execute awards, right? And so knowing that the applicant has their cost share already ready to go gives them higher confidence that, they're not going to have egg on their face if they award the grant to a utility and then the utility says, we can't come up with a cost share, right? And so that's really where the confidence comes from on their part, they explained. Whether it was I have heard anecdotally that, saying, oh, this award is subject to the DOE grant being funded. That's not as strong as like, hey, yeah, you're approved for it. But have I been able to go through and look at each utility's application and see what was their funding source and what was the approval like before they got awarded? I don't have that. So.
Thank you.
I think one thing to think about in light of the previous application, you're seeking 100 million and reclosers, all these different things, and it was at a higher amount, right? Is more than it is now. So clarifying to the commissioner's previous questions, is it criticality or is it system-wide that you're trying to seek within the scope of the funding on the next application? Because that's going to be pretty apparent that you're actually, if you're only asking for what you presented to us today, you're reducing the scope, and you might be, I don't know if you're going to ask for the same amount or if you're going to ask for a lesser amount, but that's right on the table now that, that change exists.
Yeah, I would say we don't know what amount we would be requesting until we see what the funding opportunity kind of presents. So they have changed. I think the first time for Smart Grid Grant, it was only 50 million. I think you could apply for it. And then the second time around was 100 million, right? And so, we don't know what their appetite is. And again, it's going to be subject to with the new administration and their direction on GRIP. And, we'll find out then kind of what parameters we need over.
Can you give DOE options? I mean, could you say for this scope, this is our preferred scope. It's larger. This is what we request. It's the maximum of whatever you've allowed us to apply for. But we also have an alternative reduced scope that would still be meaningful. And I mean, do they allow that in the application process?
I haven't heard of that being allowed. They kind of want to make sure that the applicant and their commissioner are pretty aligned and committed to. There's a specific scope that we think is critical and necessary. And yeah, I haven't seen where they've allowed an applicant to submit multiple options and allow the DOE to.
Okay. Well, maybe part of your calculus then is going to be kind of this penny pinching culture that we're already hearing about, right? Might be then better or more successful to focus in on and explain, why you're seeking a lesser amount perhaps for the most critical needs, and kind of make them concerned that if they don't approve it, the feds might have egg on their face for not protecting people in Hawaii from danger, right? Like I think they might be sensitive to that too. There's a number of like weird psychological considerations probably with this next administration. Yeah, I know.
Other questions from the commission? All right, I'll turn it over to the consumer advocate. Any questions?
Oh,
For
thanks,
me?
Mike. I just had one question, because I feel like you guys did do a lot of community outreach in the previous applications. So I guess going forward, I guess one of the statements was about specific future discussion with community groups. Is that something that you could build upon? And I'll give an example, like, for the the smart reclosers, you can sectionalize the line better. Yeah. So I know customers in PSPS areas are very concerned, right, about an outage. So I don't know if you guys have done that, but if you can sectionalize a line, then maybe, certain areas won't, have an outage potentially in that area. And is that like a future discussion topic you can do with a community to meet
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I agree with you. I felt like we did a pretty strong job of like the community engagement and in the community benefits plan. I think maybe there's an opportunity to, I think what the DOE might be looking for is like, okay, in November of 2025, you're going to go like for grid mod, right? Like I would go and I would go do neighborhood board presentations on AMIs coming out, right? And we want to make you aware of it. These are the benefits. This is the equipment you're going to see on some of the poles that are coming out. So don't be alarmed. Here's kind of the RF mesh considerations, all those things. And I think that might be like the level of detail they're looking for. Is like, give us a plan for like which neighborhood boards you're going to and when, and what specifically are you going to talk to them about, right? And so I think that, I think what you're talking about with like smart reclosers and how do we like better sectionalize during like a PSPS event. Yeah, like we can look at, okay, well, what's kind of like the deployment schedule look like in the plan, right? And kind of lay out for the DOE, okay, if we're going to go do that, then these would be the neighborhood boards that we would plan to go to talk about PSPS and how the program's evolved and what it means for you as a customer, right? And how it means, potentially reduce reliability impacts and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Earlier this week, we invited another utility that was awarded a GRIP grant in
Okay.
California. And so some of the feedback they gave to us is they were very specific on who they were engaging with. Was very targeted. So they picked basically disadvantaged communities as the beneficiaries that were also in need. They also selected minority-owned entities to partner with and identify the specific roles that those entities would do and how the engagement would go about. So just hearing about, like, just asking you pointed questions, your application seemed very little too loose versus when I spoke to them, their application was very targeted and they specified which areas were going to be benefited and who was going to be carrying out the community engagement, who was going to be used to basically put in the equipment and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, we did identify like organizations and disadvantaged communities and all that, but I think, you know, maybe, like I said, some of those details around like specific neighborhood board meetings and like when we would go and really kind of laying out that roadmap and things like that are things. But I mean, the feedback that you shared though, certainly, you know, is something we're definitely going to be, if there's an opportunity for a grip 3, we're going to be super specific on everything. So that would make sure that that's not a criticism or a weakness.
And I was in that presentation too, and just to the commissioner's point, that the sense we got listening to it was that it was a very community-oriented application, that they brought in all the water carriers, like I think it's over 100 water utilities who are signed in already as part of the application. Obviously, your application may be different in a lot of ways, but you know, when you're comparing this application to that application, you know, there's a different feel as far as the collaboration community benefits, maybe. You know, I'm just throwing that out, and I think that's what the commissioner is speaking to.
We've still got plenty of time on the agenda, so if there, I think I should open up questions to the first presentation as well, in case there are any that people didn't feel like they had a chance to get in before the break. But I'm also happy to adjourn early if that's okay, okay with everyone else. All right, seeing a lot of nods. Well, thank you for your presentations. Thank you for your questions. And yeah, we really appreciate you all attending and helping keep us up to date.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.